The Houthis boasting of military capabilities. The US and the UK today said they believe their joint attacks on Houthi targets on Friday had significantly degraded the Houthis' ability to strike shipping in the Red Sea.
I can tell the House today that our initial assessment is that all 13 planned targets were destroyed. At the drone and cruise missile base in Barney, 9 buildings were successfully hit. A further 3 buildings were hit at Abs airfield, along with a cruise missile launcher caught in the open. We have seen no evidence thus far of civilian casualties, which we took great care to avoid.
But today it's suspected that a Houthi missile hit a US-owned cargo ship sailing off the coast of Yemen. It follows reports of an attempted cruise missile strike on a US Navy vessel in the Red Sea on Sunday. Rishi Sunak in the Commons would not rule out further attacks on Houthi forces. The difference between past and present Labour leaderships was starkly on display.
Labour backs this targeted action to reinforce maritime security in the Red Sea.
We've had years of bombardment of the people of Yemen by weapons supplied by Britain from Saudi Arabia. And we have this dreadful conflict going on in Gaza where there are 30,000 people dead or missing. Where is the comprehensive plan by the Western nations to try to bring about a comprehensive peace?
Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ed Davey was jeered in his first Commons intervention since he was criticised over the post office scandal. Both the Lib Dems and the SNP said the Prime Minister should have consulted MPs before the UK attacked Houthi targets.
Whilst the Prime Minister has sought to defend his decision not to come to the House last week, it is quite clear that this House should have been recalled. It is what the public would have expected, and I would urge him to do better in future.
And threats from non-state actors.
The Defence Secretary chose today to raise the prospect of much wider military engagements on the not-too-distant horizon.
The era of the peace dividend is over. In 5 years' time, we could be looking at multiple theatres, including Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Ask yourself, looking at today's conflicts across the world, is it more likely that that number grows or reduces? I suspect we all know the answer. It's likely to grow.
Let us follow an LNG carrier.
Back in the Middle East, Qatar was reported to be diverting its liquefied natural gas tankers away from the Red Sea, suggesting that 3 days after the US-UK attacks on Houthi bases, they think what Rishi Sunak called limited strikes could have limited effect. And this conflict is not over.
Well, I've been speaking to the Defence Minister, James Cartledge, and I asked him if the UK would now retaliate over the latest Houthi attacks.
I understand there are reports of a potential missile strike in the Red Sea. Obviously, we are part of the patrol Operation Prosperity Guardian in the Red Sea, and we will be analysing that information with our allies. But that is something which is ongoing at the moment.
Right, but if there are more attacks, then what happens?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what happens in the future. I think that, as the Prime Minister made clear, we are committed to protecting the security of our people and indeed of our ships. And as you will be aware, we've been absolutely clear. The reason we undertook that action in the Red Sea, deploying the Royal Air Force, was, as we see it, an act of self-defence because a Royal Naval ship, HMS Diamond, had been attacked, together with, of course, international shipping. So we do stand ready, but to be clear, at the moment, there are no specific plans for further attacks.
No, I understand about specific plans, but I mean, we would look ridiculous if we did nothing now, wouldn't we? I mean, you started this and they're carrying on.
As I say, I mean, I can't speculate on what happens in the future. We are continuing to patrol in the Red Sea and keep a watchful eye on things, liaising with our allies. I think it's the right thing to do.
Totally understand that, but you can't have thought that one round of airstrikes would stop the Houthis. Did you?
Well, obviously, we've undertaken this action. We now see what happens next. As I said to you, we are continuing to patrol in the Red Sea. We are ready to respond. But of course, it depends what happens in the future. And so it's not my job to speculate.
Your boss, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, has made a remarkable speech in which he says that we have moved from being in a post-war era to a pre-war era. Does this government now believe that Britain is going to be in several more wars in the future?
Well, I think what what the Secretary of State was stressing was, first of all, the extraordinary contribution the United Kingdom is making to supporting stability around the world, because I think this is so important to stress. The way to win the next war is by deterring it from happening in the first place. And the way we do that is show that we are committed. We're a strong part of NATO. NATO itself is part of our deterrence, being there with all those nations. And of course, by having the capability to deploy, and in addition, I should say, by supporting our allies in Ukraine. That is the key point. It's about being ready for that. It isn't about saying we are about to go to war.
Well, I mean, it is according to Mr. Shapps, who says conflict is likely to grow. In fact, he said that it's likely we could be in several theatres at the same time, effectively, with Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. Now, to many people, that is a quite terrifying prospect that he's raising.
I think he's being open about the situation. I heard the speech as well, and he was setting out the range of actors that potentially could act in a nefarious way in global politics. We have to be alive to that, but also stressing, and this is, I think, a key point, he stressed the historic role the UK has played in being a force for good, a force for freedom. And I think the key point is, if we stand with our allies, if we support our armed forces as we have done, and if we continue to support Ukraine, which we've done with £2.5 billion more of funding, then of course we will be doing everything possible to ensure we do deter a more unstable world. But we have to face the world as it is. I think he made the point we have to be realistic, and that's why we are committed to supporting our armed forces.
I mean, the language coming out of your colleagues in cabinet is a lot more alarmist, I have to say, than what you're saying. I mean, we've had in the last couple of days David Cameron talking about the red lights flashing on the dashboard around the world. We now have Grant Shapps talking about conflicts with superpowers around the world and saying we are in a pre-war phase in our history. I mean, you've got to conclude this has been a spectacular breakdown in world diplomacy. Unfortunately, there are malign actors. Putin chose to invade Ukraine. I wish that hadn't happened. Grant Shapps would have wished it hadn't happened. The whole of the free world will have wished that, but unfortunately it has. So you do have to face the world as it is, and you have to address it head on. So yes, it is a challenging world. The way to deal with that is to be realistic about the threats, to work closely with allies, and to, for example, commit to supporting Ukraine. So it is challenging, but we're confident that we can deal with these challenges by supporting the UK armed forces. Minister, thank you very much. You're welcome.